I can remember thinking that there were so many of his brothers in arms that came and visited us, and I heard them, even as a child, talking about the lack of support. I knew in my heart that wasn't right, and that there had to be a better plan for those that serve and sacrifice for our nation. I had then an innate sense of what it was like to be a family member, and to see that go bag go out the door and not know if or when my husband was going to be returning, and living that life alongside other military families.
So, was there one family or one couple, one moment early on that made the stop just being a mission statement and start feeling very real to you?
It was his 7th combat mission in Afghanistan, and he and his unit of Rangers were ambushed, and the enemy combatants actually, when they opened fire, one of the bullets went through his plates, his body armor, and it went under his armpit and severed his spine. So Travis is now paralyzed from the rib cage down. Travis has the most amazing wife and the most incredible little girl.
Welcome to the Bay Bills. I'm Tracie Domino. 3%. That's how much of the American military is Special Operations Forces, the tip of the spear. 3% of the people carry the missions the rest of us never hear about, and they carry them home too, into their marriages, their kitchens, their kids' lives. And a lot of them are right here. The command that runs American Special Operations sits at MacDill Air Force Base, which makes Tampa, quietly, one of the most important cities in the country for the people who do this work. My guest today spends her life on what happens after the mission. Kerry Irvin is this Chief Executive Officer of Operation Healing Forces, and under her guidance, it has grown into one of the organizations these families lean on when the cost of service follows them home. Their signature work brings wounded and struggling special operations couples and caregivers into donated homes for 5 days, built an idea they call bonds that cure. And Kerry doesn't do this from the outside. She's a former national security and intelligence officer, an Army aviator's wife, and the mother of 2 Army infantrymen. She has lived this. Today we get into that world, why Tampa sits at the center of it, and what it actually takes to help these families heal. Kerry, welcome to the Bay Builds. Now, you've said that this work is both professional and, of course, deeply personal. You're the daughter, the wife, and the mother of soldiers. Take me to the moment you realize that people who serve come home needing a whole different kind of support, and that you couldn't look away from it any longer.
Wow. Thank you for having me first and foremost. And I think it goes back to when I was a child. My dad was a Vietnam era veteran, and he served in Vietnam, and he came home and he continued serving through 20 years. And I can remember thinking that there were so many of his brothers in arms that came and visited us, and I heard them, even as a child, talking about the lack of support. Sometimes, unfortunately, there was actually anger and animosity against them, and I knew in my heart that wasn't right, and that there had to be a better plan for those that serve and sacrifice for our nation. And then, I had my own career in government, and I worked alongside Special Operations Forces service members, and I see the commitment that they make to our nation, and I know the sacrifices that they and their families make. And I married one. I married a special operator. I married a night stalker, and an Army aviator that does the tough work and does go out. So I had then an innate sense of what it was like to be a family member, and to see that go bag go out the door and not know if or when my husband was going to be returning, and living that life alongside other military families. And I think that it was at that point in time that I knew there had to be a better solution, and that one leader, one organization, one idea was not going to be enough to create the change. So I did start working in the nonprofit field. I'm going to tell you, when it really revved up was when my 2 sons joined the Army. You want to talk about something? My husband even jokes, because he said, I've been on 16 deployments, and you never were that nervous. The first time my son deployed, I was so nervous. I was a basket case. It's
I couldn't
different.
imagine.
Yeah.
My goodness.
It's very different. But I knew at that point in time that I could make a difference. And I really geared up, and I dug in at that point in time and really worked on collaboration, working with other organizations, doing good work to see how we could amplify.
That's incredible. I couldn't even imagine
just so amazing for all the mothers who go through that experience. So now you had just kind of mentioned, so before this, you were a national security intelligence officer,
I was.
and that's a different world from running a nonprofit, of course.
Right.
What did that chapter teach you about the special operations community that you couldn't have learned any other way?
It definitely is different. It taught me about the level of commitment that a unit can have to an ideal, to something greater than themselves. And we see that across the entire military. But I think for me, working alongside them on missions, my territory was Middle East and North Africa. So we were far from home. Back then, I'm going to date myself a little bit, but back then we didn't really have easy comms. So it was a little bit harder to stay in touch with family members and loved ones across the ocean. So at the level of commitment that people had to our mission and to our nation really hit home with me at that point in time. And I think it's one thing to hear about it, to see it, to put your hand across your chest whenever the national anthem comes on and to show that respect, but to actually feel that respect because you're walking the walk alongside these men and women who choose to put their lives on the line for us all. It's hard to get to a point where you really understand it at that level unless you are there.
Sure, that's just so incredible. So now Operation Healing Forces was founded back in 2011
Mhm.
by Gary and Denise Markell. When you stepped in to lead it, what did you see that they'd built, and what did you know in your gut that you wanted to grow?
So, the Markells had a vision. They didn't have any military affiliation, which is something that is still to this day just surprises me because of the level of commitment that they have to the mission. But what I saw was a foundation, a framework that had great ideas. Some had creeped a little bit. Mission creep is one of the hardest things in the nonprofit. We all want to serve and we want to serve the needs that we see. So I saw potential. I saw the potential to build capacity, to build capabilities, and also to strip down to the foundation and build where we were the best. I really was very intentional when I came on board, understanding what the rest of the community offers, what our sister organizations offer. And I stripped away some of the things that were redundant in the
Mhm.
community, and I built strong partnerships alongside my team with other organizations and their teams so that we have this referral resource that we can utilize. But I saw unlimited potential, and we've grown exponentially since I came on board 4.5 years ago. And definitely, we're celebrating our 15th year anniversary this year. And the growth that has occurred from, 1 to 2 therapeutic retreats a year to this year, we'll do more than 63 therapeutic
Wow.
retreats. And we went from having no immediate needs or hardship financial grants until 2019. And then from 2019 to now, this year, we'll have over $3 million worth of grants that we're going to be able to invest into the community for those crisis moments, for that hardship, for the mental health care needs that are out there that are not being covered by government means. So the ability to strip down and focus on where we're the best, I saw that back then and I knew we could do it. And my team has far surpassed anything that I'd hoped for.
This is really remarkable, really just so impressive. So, as a military spouse yourself, you've lived some version of what these families go through. How much of this job is you drawing on things you've personally felt at your own kitchen table or in your own home?
A lot. I'll tell you, sometimes I have to walk out. I have to walk out and take a walk around the building and just kind of remove my personal
Hmm.
feelings from it because sometimes it brings things home. We had a helicopter crash, two Special Operations Forces helicopter crashes, training accidents. A lot of people forget that people perish in training accidents. It's not always combat related. And 2 years ago, we had two back to back. With my husband being a night stalker, you can probably imagine we've lost many people dear to us that were Army aviators and the people that they call the passengers, your Green Berets, your Army Rangers, your Delta Force folks. And so it's really hard whenever a casualty comes in or whenever a case comes in for a surviving family member or surviving, especially the surviving children, to provide support for that. And I think being part of that military community hits home on a different level because I know people, either I've experienced it or I
Hmm.
know people who have experienced that wide variety of need.
So, was there one family or one couple, one moment early on that made the stop just being a mission statement and start feeling very real to you?
They all do,
Hmm.
because they're all unique. We don't do cookie cutter at our offices. Our case managers are very diligent in giving unique care. But I will tell you, there is one family here in the Tampa Bay area who definitely has a piece of my heart, and that's Travis Dunn. Travis served our nation gallantly. He was a young enlisted, junior enlisted, who went to war. It was his seventh combat mission in Afghanistan. And he and his unit of Rangers were ambushed, and the enemy combatants actually, when they opened fire, one of the bullets went through his plates, his body armor, and it went under his armpit and severed his spine. So Travis is now paralyzed from the rib cage down. Travis has the most amazing wife and the most incredible little girl. And the fact that they live here in Tampa really makes it easier for me to be able to see them, to bring them to special events, to share part of their lives with them. I nominated him to be the, God, what do you call it, whenever they're in the front of the parades,
Grand
the
Marshal.
Grand Marshal for the Children's Gasparilla Parade a couple years ago. And I think I was more thrilled than they were when he was selected to have that honor and to see our community circle around this young man who went to war on behalf of all of us, who to this day sacrifices because of his commitment to our nation. And to know that our Tampa Bay community rallied around him and honored him like that, oh gosh, I'm getting out here. So yes, there is many families that I feel very strongly connected to, and that's one of them.
That's so amazing. So now, as you mentioned, this Tampa piece here, I don't know if everyone knows that MacDill is home to Special Operations Command. What does that mean that the nerve center of American Special Operations is right here in our backyard? And how does that shape the work that you do?
Well, it's one of the reasons why we're located
Hmm.
here. We get more than 90% of our referrals for our therapeutic retreats program, as well as our immediate needs program and our transition assistance program come to us directly from USSOCOM, U.S. Special Operations Command's Warrior Care Program. And what that means is dispersed across the entire globe, there's more than 80,000 individuals serving our nation under the umbrella of U.S. Special Operations Command. There's countless veterans across the nation that retired out of U.S. Special Operations Command or served as part of their service to our nation. And what that means to me is that we have a direct line of communication to the nerve center of USSOCOM. When we have a family that we're working with that has certain needs, we have an open line of communication there. Admiral Bradley has been tremendous. He's newly come on board, taken the helm of it. All of his predecessors have been tremendous with their support of the formation in families. And I think that they do a great job of looking at the benevolent organizations that lean into providing assistance. And they try to find a way to really join alongside us in those efforts. There's not barriers. If there were, they've been removed by the command structure itself. And I think that that speaks volumes for the dedication that they have. The first soft truths, the Special Operations Forces, SOF, there is a list of kind of like their ethics. And the first soft truth is that people are more important than hardware. And that is something that USSOCOM lives by. That is something that Operation Healing Forces lives by. And together, I think we do great work serving those who have needs within the community that the government, the VA can't handle.
So, Special Operations Forces is about 3% of the military, but carry an outsized share of the hardest missions. What does that community carry home that's different from what the rest of the service does? And why does it need a different kind of help?
So it is all forces that serve are tremendously valuable to our armed forces. The uniqueness of the Special Operations Forces, first, you got to start with the training. The training is at a higher level, it's more dangerous in and of itself. Prior to GWOT, the Global War on Terror, most of the casualties and the deaths occurred during training accidents. I think during the 20 plus years of war, we kind of forgot about that, but now we're back in the place where we are starting to see those deaths from those training accidents. So you automatically have a higher level of training mishaps, training accidents. And when you have a mishap on a training at that level, it can result in death much easier than if it were a conventional force training. And then they also have the op tempo, so the operational cycle. That's much faster, much more condensed. These individuals can, just like my husband did, have a go bag right next to the door, and they can get a call up and have to muster up on base within a certain amount of time, and they're gone. With conventional forces, typically you know when that deployment's
Mm.
coming. It's prepared well in advance. The families have a lot of time. The families actually get briefed ahead of time. They have great support from the units, from the larger division in and of itself. But for the Special Operations Forces warriors, they move on a dime. They are immediately ready to pivot. And a lot of times when they pivot and they leave, the family members don't know how long they're going to be gone, where they're going, and if or when they're going to come back. So the stress level on the family as well as the warrior is exponentially higher because there's so much unknown. And then when they come back, reintegration is very difficult. I think it's difficult for any deployments, but because they are constantly deploying and because they are constantly doing these trainings that take them away from home, the time that they're dwelling at home is condensed. And so a lot of times things just get tapped down and buried underneath the surface
Mhm.
because they don't want to bring it up because they don't know whenever that warrior is going to be called back up. And then when you get on the flip side of that, you have those that transition out of the military, and the chances are, if they were in special operations forces, they got banged up pretty hard.
Mhm.
They had a heavy allostatic load. We talk about traumatic brain injuries, they're higher with some of the special operations forces MOSs, the types of work that they do. Right now, we're seeing injuries that have been invisible for years that are coming up to the surface. And a lot of that is because of the type of work that they do. But also, those invisible injuries include post traumatic stress.
Mhm.
It's very unusual for an operator to have done a full career or even a partial career in special operations and not have lost somebody, not have had somebody significantly injured, or to have had a significant injury, invisible or visible themselves. It's just a different world. And that's why, our nation, we have about 1% that raise their right hand and say, I'm going to serve my nation in
Mhm.
the armed forces. And just 3% of those are qualified. They have to go through rigorous qualifications to be able to come special operations forces. And there's a reason for that. And it's because it is harder.
That makes perfect sense. My goodness. So now, with all that special care that you're talking about, your signature program is the retreat, which is with couples and caregivers
Mhm.
in donated homes for about a week at a time. Walk me through what that actually happens there. What's the design behind Bonds That Cure, and why homes instead of a clinic or a
Mhm.
hotel? How does the program work?
So, one of the signatures of
Mhm.
a special operator is they're stoic and they're quiet. They're called quiet professionals for a reason. So, getting them to talk about the things going on in their minds or in their relationships is very, very difficult. And so, what we do is we have created a model that really works for us. And it is these smaller groups. We only take 4 couples at a time. We only take a handful of the special operations caregivers at a time. But these couples, this operator, this warrior, a special ops veteran, and their life partner, whether they're married or
Mhm.
not, but their life partner comes alongside 3 other couples in the home setting, like you said, because we want them to feel very comfortable. We want an emotionally safe place as well as a physically safe place. We're very ardent on the types of homes that we select
Mhm.
for this. We have donors across the nation who are so kind and generous that they open these homes up for us. And typically they're second or third homes.
Mhm.
So you can imagine they're in very nice places, beautiful homes, and they're 5 bedroom or 5 bath. And what we give them is a private space for them. But then we also have that communal space and the communal activities. And we say we're creating bonds that cure because we know that peer connection is the strongest protective factor against suicide risk. And so, what we're trying to do is we are trying to create a bond between these operators, these spouses, these significant other individuals that have been there, done it, they get it. They don't have to talk so much about it because they already know the
Uh-huh.
turmoil that they've been through. They know the sacrifices that each of them have done. A lot of times, these operators come from different branches of service. And they may not have served in the same battles. They may not have fought in the same, battles or wars. But what they do understand and what is common with them is that human connection, that human emotion. Not being home in the death in the family, not being home for the birth of a family, not being home for high school graduations or the first day of school. all of these really important milestones, they get that. The spouses, the significant others, now have someone that they can talk to that also understands the load that they're carrying and how difficult that is. But we found that in order to have long lasting impact, which is what we want, we don't want to just give them an opportunity to get away. There's great need for that. But what we want is a long lasting impact. And so we provide the means by which they can do that organically. We have our retreat leads who are all special operations veterans. So they pass the sniff test, which is really important in this community. But they pass the sniff test. They've been there, they've done it, they understand it, they get it. And they've been trained to be able to facilitate these conversations, to be able to facilitate these activities so that they're opening up conversations and pathways to understanding. And we have people that leave our week-long retreats, and these couples 10 years later are doing family vacations together in the summer, and they're sending us pictures, and we see the pictures of the children, stair-stepping year after year, getting bigger and bigger. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things to me, is knowing that we have a part to play in that, in providing them that person, that one person or two people that get it and that they feel comfortable talking to, because we're very ardent about making sure we don't bring people within the same units together. We don't bring people that are, the same branch of service together. We want them to feel free to talk about whatever's on their mind without having it get back to their chain of command, chain of concern, the brothers in arms and all of that. So we make sure that we are very diligent in creating an emotionally safe space for them. And I think that we've hit upon that doing it non-clinical works for us. There's a lot of great things that can be done within a clinical situation. We're not clinicians. We're working on what we know through the Department of Defense's suicide report that comes out every year. Some of the protective factors are peer connection and strong relationships. So we're trying to bring these couples together really to help them remember why they fell in love to begin with, helping them with their own communication, fostering strength and stability within their relationships, and then giving them that peer connection with others. And just those two things alone really help reduce risk factors. But then we add in another phase through our immediate needs program, our additional resources. So we're looking, while they're on that retreat, our retreat lead is identifying any other needs that there might be. Is there housing stability? Is there food insecurity? Is one coming up to the transition time? So 12 months out from transition, we want to start making sure that we're working with them on employment, on certifications, whatever else they might need to set them up for success. The death gap, so there's this thing called the death gap. That's the 12 months after they take the uniform off. So that's when the sense of purpose, the sense of camaraderie, that financial insecurity occurs. Sometimes there's workforce issues. Sometimes there's relationship issues, because all of a sudden this person that was gone for 6 months at a time, 6 weeks at a time, now they're in and they're wanting to do the garage the way they want to do the garage. And so, there's these issues. And I laugh, but that was actually one of the biggest fights my husband and I had. He came home from a deployment and I'd redone the garage. And that was a thing to him because life had moved on back home without him. We made changes without him. And so that's something that we're really trying to do, because that 12-month period after they take off the uniform is such a great risk that we want to use our additional resources program to provide financial grants for them where they're needed, to provide food security, housing security for them as well.
It's just so many things that you can't even really imagine. So you've scaled this to dozens of retreats a year, serving hundreds of people. What's the hardest part of growing something like this without turning healing into like a conveyor belt?
And you have to be very careful about that. I think it's the people. Our people, my team is mostly special operations veterans or military spouses of special operations veterans. So it's our tribe. And so we take great care. And for those very few that are not, they're committed to our community. And we take very great care to make sure that we are intentional about treating each and every person referred to us as an individual with individual needs, and really understanding what the risks are and what we need to do to help them not just survive, but to thrive. And I think that that's how you get off the conveyor belt, is that understanding piece, that taking the time, having the empathy, having the understanding, and really building the rapport. And I think that's what our team is good at because they know what to ask. They know the questions, and they also know sometimes there's that barrier to getting the response because of the quiet professional. They've been
Right.
taught and trained, you don't talk about the mission, you don't talk about where your spouse is going, you don't talk about where you're going, and everything stays compartmentalized. So they understand how to kind of pull that information out to make sure that the integrated care that we need to give them,
Mhm.
we have a fuller understanding of what that is.
That's really speaks a lot to your hiring process
Mhm.
and to the like how you built your team, because I would imagine that people who've not experienced that really imagine they can learn it, but they would not be able to relate on the level of a military spouse or someone who's been there themselves. It's really cool, and I would have never even thought of that, like how critical that would be. So much of this runs on trust and
Mhm.
on people opening their homes and their wallets. So how do you build the kind of credibility that gets a family to donate a five
Mhm.
bedroom home, like you said, and or a partner like the Lightning or Pods or the Laxer Family
Mhm.
Foundation to step up and donate whether their home or financially to the organization?
Well, once we get the conversation, it's
Hmm.
so much easier than you would think because the mission is so powerful and the people that we're serving are so deserving of the
Hmm.
support. I feel like what we do is we engender trust with those that want to come alongside as advocates, as allies, as donors. We really help lead them to an understanding of what the need is, first and
Hmm.
foremost, why there is a need, who the need is for, and how we serve them. One of the things that I'm adamant about is that we're very transparent, and we were transparent on everything. But you can go on our website; you'll find all of our financials up to date on there. We don't tell you that you've got to, come send us an email to get it. It's there. We want you to see
Hmm.
it. We're very proud of the fact of how we steward our donors' hard-earned money. We're very, very proud of the fact of how we have been increasing our capacity and impact over the years. But we also, all the way down to, if a donor wants to know what we're paying somebody's salary, that's transparent as well. When we put out job announcements, we put a pay scale, a range in there
Hmm.
as well. So I think we operate from a place of trust through transparency and through conversation and through strong stewardship of helping them to meet those that we're serving. The home donors have an opportunity to meet with those people that are in their homes if they so choose. They get to have an opportunity to break bread with them at one of the meals if that's what they would like to do. And I think that in and of itself, getting to know the person that you're supporting and the reason why they needed the support is profound. And one of the greatest things that I'm proud of is we have such a strong retention rate for our donors. When somebody comes alongside our mission, they stay.
That's really just awesome. And for someone who would want to get involved or be able to donate their home for you,
Mhm.
I'm sure they could do that through your website
Mhm.
or through calling your office, right?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
We'll make sure that that number is
Thank
readily
you.
available.
We would appreciate that.
So you measure this work in outcomes, not
Mhm.
just like how many retreats, obviously.
Right.
So, how do you actually know a retreat worked, and what is the tracking? Is it 6 months later, a
Mhm.
year later? How do you keep track of that?
That's a great question
Mm-hmm.
because one of the things that we want to make sure of is that we have a long term impact. The community is continually evolving. We've gone recently from the global war on terror to a period of not quite dormancy,
Hmm.
but where we had a little bit of a breath that we could take as a community, to now we have the Mideast firing back up. We're having drone injuries, which are very different and very unique with these head injuries coming in. And so, one of the things that we established a few years ago was what are we going to measure on? What are our measurements? So, we measure on what we call the 3 R's, and that's rehabilitation, resilience, and reintegration. And we have surveys prior to service for our therapeutic retreats. We have our surveys immediately after the conclusion of the retreat, and then we have 6 month and 12 months. But during that time, we also have an alumni coordinator. We have a wellness and alumni coordinator assigned to those couples that go through, along with that retreat lead, that are continuously staying in contact with that. We have an alumni group that is extremely active and we lean into them, allowing them to know that they have that open line of communication. So we measure our outcomes and impacts by the surveys, but also very, very importantly by the feedback that we get personally from them, by those communications that we have one-on-one with them, through the email interchanges, through the family activity days that we will put on across the nation. And we're really looking for answers to, are we making the difference that we think we are? Are we doing the work that we say that we're setting out to do? Is there a trend that we're not seeing? Is there an evolving need that we weren't measuring for in the past, and maybe we don't have a program for? And if that's the case, do we have a partner for that? If we don't have a partner for that, then is that something that we need to try to collaborate with elsewhere, or do we build on within ourselves? And it's that data, those metrics that have really kind of helped us evolve our programming and our program delivery.
So now let me ask, you are asking wounded operators and their spouses to be very vulnerable, right? To
Yes.
do the emotional work. Some of them are, as you said, deeply skeptical of exactly that. So what do you say to the operator who thinks the retreat is soft or that it won't really touch what they're carrying? Like, how do you get through to those people?
So, that is actually easier than what you would think it is. Our issue is more of getting them to come because they say somebody else needs it more than I do. The operators
Interesting.
that are referred to us, and they're referred, keep that in mind. So if somebody somewhere has established that they are wounded, injured, ill, or a family member of a fallen, but these operators, these veterans, typically will point elsewhere and say, I know somebody who needs it more than me. I don't want to take the space up. So when we do get them in to one of our programs in these therapeutic retreats, I think that first day, and all my retreat leads will agree with me on this. We snicker about it sometimes. That first day, they are kind of like, walking around each other. We might have some bowed out chests a little bit, talking about, well, were you here? When were you there? Those sorts of things. But by that dinner, that first night dinner, those walls are down because they all get it. And, they all know because we only serve the Special Operations Forces operators, and we only serve those that are identified as wounded, injured, ill, or family of a fallen. So they are already in a community of people who have had some sacrifices. And it's a lot easier to allow yourself to be vulnerable once that huge hurdle of trust has been overcome. And I think that by day two, the things it's very common for us to hear, a significant other, a spouse to say, I never knew that about my husband. For a warrior to say, I didn't know my wife felt that way when I was gone. There's an opening up of conversations. And the beautiful thing is they think it's organic, but our retreat leads are back there in the background, kind of orchestrating how the conversations can open up and allow them the freedom to really talk about the things that have maybe been buried down for a while.
And this is where it's just as someone on the outside looking in, where the group setting is so valuable
Yes.
because just asking them one-on-one probably wouldn't get
No.
those responses nearly as valuable as you would get from that group.
Absolutely. And the one-on-one with your peer, right?
Right.
This isn't somebody that you feel like is judging you or looking for an aha moment. This is your peer. This is somebody who gets you.
Right.
And
who's
that
been
makes
there.
it makes a big difference, an enormous difference.
So now this community loses people constantly, right? To their wounds, to their memories, sadly to suicide. So you've trained in suicide intervention.
Yes.
So you don't get to keep this at arm's length. So how do you carry the ones that you couldn't reach in time? And I mean, I know it's got to be like the hardest thing about this, but tell us how that goes.
It is enormously difficult, well beyond my work at Operation Healing Forces or any of my work outside of the government. I lost people to suicide. I lost people I cared deeply about. I lost people that I worked with. And that's something that never leaves you. I think anybody in the world who has lost a loved one who has died by suicide, the first thought that goes through your head after the initial shock is, were there signs? Did I miss something? And, it takes a lot of talking through that. It takes a lot of counseling sometimes to be able to move through that and understand that sometimes there weren't any signs and, survivor's guilt. is in
Sure.
combat, but survivor's guilt is sometimes long after combat, whenever we lose a comrade in arms, a brother or sister in arms, to death by suicide. The veteran population dies by suicide at a rate 60% higher than the civilian population. That is not a number you want to be winning at. You don't want to win that race. And I think that every organization I know of out there doing benevolent work, we always have an eye to, how can we help reduce risk factors? How can we make a difference? How can we pull that number down? And we're also seeing a climbing rate of military spouse suicides. The Department
Oh,
of
wow.
Defense came out with their suicide report last year that showed an increase in military spouse suicides. I encourage people to keep that in mind as well, that the lifestyle does take a heavy toll on that. Unemployment, underemployment, the loss of a sense of identity, loss of a
Mhm.
sense of purpose. Sometimes they're far from home, but the community as a whole struggles, and it's not something that I ever want any of us to become immune to, the feeling of how bad it hurts for us to lose even one service member to suicide.
Yeah, it's just so devastating. And the work you're doing, as it is saving one person at a time, it's really just so impactful. It's really emotional,
It
honestly.
is very emotional.
But it's just such great work. So now, the nonprofit leadership, we look at nonprofits from the outside, and the public face is always the galas and the checks and the photos. So what part of this job that the donors and the highlight reels never see?
They don't see the tears shed. We get cases in that will break your heart. It will break anybody's heart. They don't see that. They don't see the struggle to make sure we maintain our own humanity. We
Hmm.
never want to become calloused to
Right.
anybody that we're serving. But I don't think that the donors, the advocates, the allies, they see the great work that's being done to support the community. And I tell my team all the time, we have to walk the talk, and it has to start with our own team. We have to worry about the wellness of our own team. We have to worry about compassion fatigue. We have to worry about them taking on some of these shouldering some of the burdens of the care on their own. We provide counseling. We provide access to counseling for our team members. And I don't think a lot of the community knows that what goes on behind the scenes is how dedicated we are to taking care of those that we work alongside too on our own team.
So important. So now, when your husband and your sons look at the work you do, what do they say to you about it? And do they see it the way the public does, or do they see something else?
I think they're very proud. I think that they love the fact that I've chosen to serve their tribe, right? I'm
Hmm.
chosen to serve and make a difference in something that's tangible to them. One of the things that I love is when one of my sons or daughter-in-laws will send a referral my way and say, "Hey, this person's in need. Can you help?" Or when I have a resource that they can share with somebody that's entrusted to their care. So I think that they really love that. My husband, I think, is very proud of the work that we do, and he has a deep, deep understanding after serving 32 years in the military, the need that's there. And I think he's grateful that there's organizations like mine, like ours, that are out there trying really hard to do the good work for those that serve and sacrifice. And I also think that they think that I work too much. So, yeah.
I'm sure they do. So Tampa has quietly become the heart of this, the command, the community, the organizations that
Mhm.
support it. What do you want the city to understand about the role it plays in America's special operators?
Tampa's home. Tampa
Mm.
is home to America's special operators. And I'm going to tell you something. If you look around, you probably have a special operations active duty or veteran in your neighborhood. We're everywhere. And the reason being is so many, just like me and my husband, we were first stationed in Tampa in 2016 when he was stationed at SOCOM. And we were here, and like within a month, we were like, dude, we need to live here. This is where we want to retire. And it was so funny because I hear, some of our military friends they're arguing as they start getting closer to retirement. Maybe the spouse wants to live on this coast and the other one wants to live, or they want mountains versus beaches. We were both like, done. This is it. We want Tampa. And I think what I would love for the community to understand is what an honor it is to have the hub of our nation's special operations right here in your own backyard. Like I said, about 83,000 individuals serve our nation across the globe, and they're all based right behind those gates. And we also have CENTCOM here. We have other organizations behind that gate, and Tampa is home to all of them. And they're in your little league, they're in your church, they're going to the YMCA, to your gyms, they're in your kids' schools. And I feel like it's really exciting for a community of this caliber, and I think very elite community. When I look around at the businesses, I'm privileged to be a part of the CEO Council, and so I get to see some of the work being done behind these amazing business leaders and what they're doing to bring business to Tampa, bring economic development to Tampa, and to know that we have this level of elite business leaders, elite civic leaders, and elite warriors. And I mean, I am a Lightning fan too, and a Bucks fan, so, and elite athletes as well. And so to me, of course we're here. Of course we're all a part of this community, because this community is just about being the best it can be. And SOCOM is that in the military.
That's always just exciting to hear, for what, no matter how you came to Tampa or how anyone came to Tampa, to get that association and to be able to be so proud of that is really just, I think, very exciting. So when you picture Operation Healing Forces 10 years from now, what's reaching families that it can't reach today?
Well, we have an issue with not being able to fund enough therapeutic retreats. Currently, I told you our model, and we know our model works for long term, so we're not going to change keeping our retreats small. We have more than 800 couples on our wait list. And if you remember, I told you those are referrals. So those have been identified by their chain of command or their chain of concern as having a need. They're wounded, they're injured, they're ill, or for our caregivers retreats or for our immediate needs, they could have some other needs. But those individuals need assistance. And we have 800 couples on our wait list that we can't facilitate getting them into a therapeutic retreat right now because we don't have the means to do that. 10 years from now, I would love to have a zero wait list. If it were up to me, I would love to have a retreat and be like, how are we going to fill this retreat? We don't have enough couples to go on it. We don't have enough caregivers to go on it. Unfortunately, that's not the case. We're working hard. We're a small team. We're based right here in Tampa. We're national. We serve across the entire globe, globe now, because we do have some retreats for those that are serving in Japan. But we are headquartered right here in Tampa alongside USSOCOM, and we're in your backyard. And I think that the growth that we're seeing in the city of Tampa is exciting to me because there's a parallel to businesses growing, to cities growing, to families growing, to seeing those benevolent organizations grow as well. And so I hope and I pray that as our great city grows, it will turn its focus inward to see how they can help support others that are in need within their own city walls.
And before we get started, you were saying you were sitting on a commission now. Tell me about that a little bit.
So I have the great honor of being a state commissioner for the Commission on the Status of Women for the state of Florida. Governor DeSantis appointed me in November of last year. And one of the things I really love about this commission is that we are diving into issues that impact all families. I personally am very focused in on unemployment, underemployment, and childcare. I think you can't have workforce development at the level that we want to see without being able to have childcare advance rapidly as well. And another focus area of mine, with Florida being one of the most populated by military families, is women veterans, military spouses, and their families as well. I think that, here in Tampa, the Chamber of Commerce, they coined this phrase called Military Bay USA. And I think we do a really great job of that in Tampa, of really trying to focus in on supporting the military families. And as part of this commission on the status of women, we really focus in on what's working right in some communities, and taking that and extrapolating the good things, the good lessons out of it, and bringing that to other communities across the state. And then also finding out what the barriers are and understanding what the reasoning behind those barriers are. Is it a lack of understanding? Is it a lack of information? Is it a lack of resources? And taking that up higher into Tallahassee so that we can add a voice to our state's women and to their families, and try to make sure that they are heard, that their needs are heard. And then across the cities, to make sure that, these business leaders, as they're looking to grow their businesses, that they are providing workforce development plans that perhaps include childcare. We're starting to see that. And I think that's a great step in the right direction if you want to retain good talent.
That's going to be a really great thing, I think, to bring other people into town and to probably attract more businesses as all of that develops.
Absolutely.
That'll be really exciting. So if there's someone listening right now, an operator, a spouse, a caregiver who is barely holding it together and has never asked anyone for help, talk straight to them for a second. What do you want them to know?
You're not forgotten. I think one of the things that the struggle is that sometimes the feeling is that the sacrifices were made in the shadows, and so the concern is not there. And I don't think that's the case. I think it's been my experience that when we've had a need, we've had people step up to fulfill that need for others. And I want people to know that there is assistance for them, whether it's financial assistance, whether it is mental health care, whether it is dealing with chronic pain and you're feeling like the VA maybe isn't being able to remedy that quickly enough. If you're not getting the assistance that you need for mental health care, there's so many different avenues out there. We have within our organization, we have tremendous resources, and I encourage anybody to contact us. I know you're going to share our phone number. You can also reach me directly at kerry.irvin at ophf.org. Our website has a list of the things that we do, but don't let that stop you. If you don't see what's on what your need is on that list, reach out anyhow, because remember, I told you we worked very hard to create partnerships with so many collaborative resources out there. And so if we can't provide that assistance, I guarantee you we can find that assistance. And the thing that we do really well is we don't just tell somebody a phone number or a website. We do a really warm handover with a human being, and we turn over that need from our person that we're referring to them, and we follow up with that to make sure that nobody falls through the cracks. So for me to say to anybody listening that might feel like they have a need is you're not alone and you're not forgotten. We just have to know that you need us.
Gave me goosebumps. It's really so cool, really, that so many people, I'm sure, don't even know that like there's an option for them. And then hopefully now they will know that they can make that call, and whether you guys are providing that information, that there's someone who can make that connection for them. Because I think that's sometimes the hardest thing, is making the call, getting the right person
Absolutely.
on the phone. And that probably intimidates a lot of people and keeps them from making the call in the first place. So
And
that's
that's what
really cool that you do that.
Thank you. And I think, what's what we tell people too is it can feel overwhelming. And when you're already feeling isolated, depressed, when you're in that downward spiral, sometimes trying to find the right resource is intimidating and overwhelming. So all you have to do is reach out to us and let us do the legwork for you. So reach out. We will do the legwork. You don't have to be overwhelmed by the choices that are out there. We'll listen. We'll find out. We'll do, a conversation where we really understand what the need is, and then we'll do the work.
That's really just really wonderful. So now, Kerry, here wrapping up, we ask everyone the same three questions. We call it the lightning round, which is
Okay.
kind of appropriate today. So the first question we ask everyone is, what's your hype song? Which would be also like if you were a baseball player, your walk-up music, or the song that like fires you up if you're going into a meeting, or you need to just, you have to have a good day. What would you put on the radio for yourself?
Oh, goodness. I don't like well, I won't say that. I feel very nervous about doing public speaking sometimes. sometimes. So if I have to do a keynote or go be on a panel, which once I'm in it, I'm great. I love it. But it's the hype that I have to do. American Woman by Lenny Kravitz. Like, man, I feel invincible as soon as I start hearing that. I'll jam it out on my AirPods and, I'm sitting there like jamming to it. And I go out on that stage like I own it. So I would definitely say American Woman. It's hard to listen to that guitar riff and not feel empowered.
That's a great choice. And then second question is, what is your current favorite Tampa Bay area restaurant?
Burns, and it's such a classic. And I think there's two parts to it is it's great food. It's a great restaurant. I love the history behind it, but then also the Laxer family owns it, right? And they are one of our strongest partners, and they're so good. They have such great concern for those that we're serving. So every time I eat there, I enjoy the food, but I also enjoy knowing that I'm a part of part of a restaurant that cares about its own community.
What a great classic choice. And then the last final question is, what is the best business gift you've ever received?
Trust. I think having individuals and organizations put their trust in me, having the Markells trust me to move forward their mission, their legacy, and empowering me with that trust, it's something that I don't carry lightly. And it's also something that I feel like I have to be sure that I'm turning around and helping empower the people that are coming up behind me. Mentoring them, whether formally or informally. But I definitely think trust. Now, besides that, tangible, I had an American flag that a unit flew over Afghanistan in my honor, and they encased it for me. And that one is definitely a tangible gift that I look at and am very honored and touched by.
That's pretty cool. Not too many
Very
people could say
cool.
they have that.
Very, very cool,
That's
for
awesome.
sure.
Well, Kerry, this was really wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us
I
today.
appreciate that. You made it very easy. It was like sitting across a coffee table having a conversation with you, just like you said it would be. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Here's what I keep coming back to from this conversation. We tried Pass Dill. We cheer at lightning games where they honor these heroes. And most of us never think about what happens when one of those operators comes home carrying something he can't put down. Kerry thinks about it every single day. She has turned a whole life of service, her own and her family's, into a way for these couples to find their way back to each other. 3% of our military gives almost everything. Kerry makes sure they don't have to heal alone, and she does it right here in our backyard. That's about as Tampa Bay a story as I know how to tell. If this moved you in the way it moved me, follow us at the Bay Bills and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. And go learn about Operation Healing Forces and how you can stand behind their work. I'm Tracie Domino, and I'll see you next time.